Biomass fuels and biofuels. So fuels are materials that are consumed to produce energy. So anything that we consume or use to produce energy is considered a fuel. Biomass fuels are fuels derived from living things, such as wood or crops or alcohol fuels, etc. These are considered renewable resources because they come from living things that can reproduce and we can make more of them. Plant material is a common biomass fuel. Plant materials contain carbohydrates, which are molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen bonds, or CHO. These are produced during photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is, again, carbon dioxide plus water plus sunlight yields glucose, which is a simple sugar, plus oxygen. So this is our basic equation for photosynthesis. And this is where our carbohydrates come from. Then plants take the glucose here and combine it in different ways to make all kinds of other carbohydrate molecules. Wood, or fuel wood. This has been used for thousands of years. If you have a wood-burning fireplace or something, you use wood for fuel. It's a primary fuel source for billions of people in the developing world, for heating, for cooking, for boiling water, etc. But this does result in deforestation. And the way this works is you first off start collecting dead and fallen trees. That's the first thing you collect. You go out and look for the easy stuff to collect. There's limbs that have fallen, there are trees that are down, etc. You collect those first. But then forests near villages are cut down as demand increases because you basically collect everything that's on the ground. So then you got to start cutting down trees. And then this leads to erosion of the topsoil because you end up with areas where there's no vegetation left to hold that topsoil in place. Then field crops. So these are commonly used in developing countries as well. Simplest use is to burn them. So you take your field crops, your leftover corn stalks or whatever, and you burn those and use that almost like you would wood. Burn it as a fuel source. So this includes things like corn, hay, and straw. Crop residues are another fuel source. So this would be things like any kind of stalks that are left over, hulls, pits, shells from corn, etc., grains, nuts, etc., etc. So all the leftover bits after you're done processing the crops and getting the edible parts out, all the leftover bits you could dry out and burn those as a fuel source. Then fecal material. So dried feces of herbivores contains undigested grass. So you're talking about things like cows. As they eat the grass, part of that's undigested. Then you dry that out. The feces from cows is used in areas with limited forest. So there's not a lot of forest, maybe a lot of grasslands for the cows to eat. But there's not a lot of forest. There's not a lot of wood to use. These are sometimes hung on the sides of buildings to dry. They may also just be laid out to dry on the ground. But undigested grass is the main material that burns as fuel. So you've got a lot of undigested grass in the fecal material. You dry it out, get the water out of it, and then what you're left with is basically dry, compacted grass that you can burn fairly easily. Peat formation. So peat is a light, spongy material that is often brown in color and looks like soil. So it looks like soil, but it's not. Forms in bogs, which are poorly drained areas with spongy, wet ground. So you got these bog areas where you have all this plant material growing, then dies, and then falls into this acidic, low oxygen water. And then that slows down the decomposition because the acidic environment and the low oxygen slows down or stops bacteria growth. Partially decomposed plant material accumulates and is compressed to form peat. And then it takes thousands of years for peat to form. So even though this comes from plants that are just dying and then partially decomposing, it does take a long time for a peat to form. So it's not really necessarily a super renewable resource. This is bordering on the non-renewable resources. And then peat use. It's a low-cost fuel that's been used for centuries. It's kind of like a low-grade coal, actually. over time, the peat would actually become coal. This is the beginning stages of coal formation. But you cut it out of the bog, dry it in the sun, then burn it in the stove. If highly decomposed, peat is more efficient than wood. So this can actually burn better than wood if it's properly decomposed. This is used to heat homes in Ireland, England, parts of Northern Europe, and the United States. So it's more common in northern environments. We have a lot more bogs and stuff in northern environments where you would have peat formation occurring. And then biofuels, producing fuels similar to gasoline from crops like soybeans and corn. Ethanol is a common one. Ethanol is a liquid produced from barley, wheat, and corn. It's commonly mixed in with gasoline. In fact, you go buy gasoline now, most gasoline is 10% ethanol. There's also E15 gasoline, which is 15% ethanol, and this can actually be used in any vehicles that are newer than 2001. And then there are flex fuel vehicles, which can actually burn E85 gasoline, which is actually 50 to 85% ethanol. And if you go to the gas pump, you'll notice that the E15 is cheaper than the regular grades of gasoline, and then the E85 is significantly cheaper than the E15. So the more ethanol in the gasoline, the cheaper it is. So it's better for the environment, and it's also better for your wallet. Biodiesel can be made from vegetable oil, animal fats, and used cooking oil. There are blends of 20% biodiesel, which is B20. This can be used in unmodified engines. You can modify engines to run on pure biodiesel as well. Currently more expensive than regular diesel fuel, but that may change over time because we do have a lot of used cooking oil and things like this that we need to do something with, and this is one option for disposing of that material, is to turn it into biodiesel that can then be used to power engines.